Hi, so here we're going to do a video looking at how to set up two-point perspective but using Illustrator. So a lot of you have some difficulty with drawing two-point perspective. That is for many reasons, just a lack of knowledge and understanding what is two-point perspective is probably the most common, and how to find those lines, like where do they even start and where do they stop. And also just practice, So if you do understand the concept of horizon line with 1 point, with 2 points, if you understand the concept, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are practiced in the skill of applying the concept. And so that's something we want to build. So here, we've already watched this video in class. He talks about this example here, this piece of art, famous Last Supper artwork. And this is how artists thought perspective worked. They knew there was some rule that they likely needed to follow, but they hadn't yet at this time kind of figured that out until a little bit later on. So here, what we're going to do in Photoshop is we are going to move on to using perspective grids, but initially we're just going to come in here, and you can see I have just made an A3 sheet and I've put 4 images on it. I would have asked you to find, or I would have given you, but if you can find examples of what you believe are two-point perspective, exterior, interior, and what you believe are examples of one-point perspective, interior views. So I've dragged and dropped them in, and what I have done is I've created these rulers. Top and left-hand side, you'll see these rulers. Under View, Rulers. Okay, so I've already got mine turned on. By default, you won't have them on. And I'm also using then these guides to just help me identify the vertical lines. So if you slip into these areas, click and drag the guides down. Let's just focus one at a time on one drawing at a time. Right. So I'm just going to delete this layer. Yes, okay. So what I have here is I've brought my 4 examples in. I've held shift to select them all at some point, and I have clicked a folder, and it has put them into a folder. This is because I'm going to move on and do other drawings in this same file. So just using layers to keep everything neat and tidy is really, really good. You can turn them on and off at any time, and it just keeps everything neat. You're sort of grouping things by a particular set. So here, the first thing I'm going to do is use the rulers to click and drag and find the vertical points that are in this drawing. So there's 2 more there I need to pop in, 1 and 2. The next thing I'm going to do is, you would have understood that there's obviously a horizon line. So there's a very flat line that exists somewhere in here. And the question is, where is that? Now, obviously, we're working a bit backwards. We're working from a source image. If you were drawing this from your own space from scratch, you'd start with the horizon line, and then you'd plot these vertical lines in. And you'd likely be working maybe just on basic ideas out off the top of your head, or you might be working on trying to visualize something that's a floor plan in front of you perhaps. But here's what we'll do with these ones. What I want to do is use the line tool on the left-hand side here. By default, it may be the rectangle tool, perhaps. Select it, anything with an arrow, the bottom right-hand side of these boxes, and select line tool means that there's extra tools available. So line tool, I made mine like a light blue, so it stands out on the page. It's quite common to draw in a light blue pencil too. And up here, the stroke, actually the stroke of that is red, so we'll just click the blue. And 1 point, let's just test it up here. Do 1 click, hold down the mouse. Now, when you do this, when we do a straight line or a vertical line, if you hold shift, it snaps and it will hold it horizontal, downward, and holding shift will hold it vertical. So using the shift button becomes really helpful, and we can see there that we end up with a nice blue line. So that looks good. 1 point, 1 pixel, and it's blue, and we're on the line tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here at the very top corner. So you choose a place to start. We're looking at just this corner here, and I'm going to hold down my mouse, and I'm going to make a line a lot longer than it is actually on the building. So it actually stops here. While I'm following the top of that ridge, I am making it longer. Okay, and so I'm just going to trust in that process and do that to begin with, and then click. And we're going to do a few others. Click and follow that deck. but make it longer. We want these lines to converge. We want them to crisscross. That's entirely what we want them to do. So crisscross, crisscross. I've actually drawn that a little bit off. And the idea is that we should understand that all these lines really, now that we've established a few of them, I guarantee that all the other ones in areas like this, with this, there's this material detail, all of them on this face are all going to converge back at that point. Right. So with that done, if we go to the upper ruler area up here and click in it and drag down and click and put that right there on where those lines intersect, that line is the horizon line. And you will find then that is one point there that there must be to create these. Let's have a look. Let's do this side. Click, follow the top roof line all the way down past that horizon line we just drew. And let's do this one. It joins here with the other previous one. And what else do we have? We've got these windows. We've actually got this deck. So we've got the top of that deck back to that point, and this point here back to that point. We've got the bottom of this window here and door to that point. Now you'll notice as these lines get closer to that horizon line, everything sort of starts to flatten out. And you'll also notice over here on the left-hand side, there becomes a point in time where you can't actually draw a line from here out. It begins to look a little bit weird. It begins to look a little bit strange. So I can actually see a few other lines. We've got these beams. Right here, and we've got a beam here, and then you've got the upper beam. So I mean, those don't go back to this point. They can only possibly go back to one other point in this drawing. It's this one here. So if I look up here in the trees and draw that beam. Now here I have gone back to this point, but notice that it doesn't actually fit. So if that is the case, it's likely because that detail is on an angle. It's not actually the same as these lines here. It is likely that this rooftop deck feature is actually built on an angle. So I will just follow those drawings there anyway. If they were straight, and here we can see what I mean. Here we can actually see those roof beams, and we can actually see that this roof is sloping, and that is why they don't meet this. So if you're going over and tracing over your images and you're thinking it doesn't meet here and it should, well, it's because that whole roof is actually on a slope. We might find that those interior beams, yeah, so there's those interior beams there. They still match, they still meet. That indicates that roof is actually, at this part here, is actually square and flat. And here we can see the underside of it. So that is square and flat and 90 degrees to this wall versus those other beams we just did, which are heavily, heavily sloped. So that's all I want you to do for these drawings. And then just below each, I want you to get the text tool and just write how many points is this, and do that in a nice dark black font. We'll write 2-point perspective exterior. Right, and pop that there. Now we will try and do as much detail as possible, and it would be great to do in 12-point font, and perhaps I just like to use like a different weight to the actual title. So we'll just use perhaps that one, and we'll just write some little notes around here. Beams above deck are sloped, not meeting the point not meeting the right hand vanishing point. So that's good. And you can just do a little line either down to that text, or you could actually just create a little box. So I actually just like to use something like this tool and a new layer, and I just like to do a little shape on that new layer and fill it with some paint. Do it however is best for you, because now we might be into skills that are a bit more complex. I sort of hope not. And then make sure that text is above that little box layer. There we go. And that just helps it stand out a bit on the actual drawing. So that's what we kind of want, just some observations using the line tool, using your rulers to try and identify where is this horizon line for this particular drawing, and where are the two vanishing points or the one vanishing point, depending on whether or not you think it's 2 point or 1 point. At the end, we'll print these out. We will actually go to view and show and hide the guides by unchecking them. And the outcome will just be a series of drawings with these lines all over them. You'll actually have to just go in and put a couple of vertical lines in just to kind of complete the observation. That'd be really good. So they'll be looking like that. And so the objective is to really understand that. We have done that sort of with other projects so far. I'd actually also just get a line and put that horizon line in as well before we turn the guides off. Show and uncheck guides. Right, there we go. So that's what we should have. And then we'll move into using Photoshop to actually create your own 2-point perspective drawings yourself in exactly the same way. And you will have lines and grids to follow to create these. But definitely worth trying to understand that concept before tackling a drawing yourself, or before going into draw over top of the Photoshop grids and guides. Right, so give that a crack.